The model was absent from the charity auction and let the girl take over. When she walked out slowly in a white dress, the manager was very surprised. Emily's confidence doubled the auction price instantly. Suddenly 2 mysterious people raised their cards and doubled the price again. Pierre was surprised to see the 2 guys who were competing for his high fashion. It was the founder and designer of the hipster clothing brand with different ideas. This lot they finally took at all costs. However, as everyone, the 2 young entrepreneurs were saluted for their good deeds, but they shot and sprayed the dress. This scene shocked everyone at the scene. They had taken the dress for the purpose of promoting themselves. As the media swarmed to the scene, they shot the dress. Overnight, the whole of Paris heard about this farce. 2 unknown young designers had gained 700,000 fans overnight. Their boutique was already very crowded. Emily came all the way here to recover the loss of the customer. This trophy at the door was very hard for her to see. The 2 hipster founders wanted Emily to see the act as art, but Emily knew exactly what they were trying to do. When they pretended to apologize to Pierre, Emily came up with a solution. Paris was surprisingly quiet in the evening. Pierre, tapping his pudding, heard a knock at the door. He greeted Emily with a breathless greeting and sat himself down. Instead of blaming Emily for this disaster, he even taught her how to beat the pudding to relieve stress. Emily claimed to have found a solution, but when she took out this trendy clothes with Peel's logo on it, immediately let Pie and feel a super stifle. No matter how much Emily fought to get them to join forces, he couldn't get his brand to have anything to do with this street fashion.
Fashion respects the people who wear it.
This is a big disrespect to him. He chose to face the darkness alone and sent Emily away. Emily's heart is filled with unexplainable guilt. The next day, the manager was surprised to hear Pierre had even cancelled his own presentation. It was clear that Emily was the only one to blame for all this.
You are fired.
Emily, who had never learned to give up. At this moment, she suddenly felt she had nothing to say. Jack and Luke came to comfort her in her most difficult moments. To fire an employee in Paris, it takes months or even years to fire an employee in Paris, as long as she had the cheek to keep working and not sign her resignation. If it weren't for their reassurance, Emily might not have lasted a week.
We will never desert you. Never.
After saying that, she was able to get rid of her as quickly as possible. She also encouraged her to learn to fight on her own. When she returned home, Emily found Anna crying on the doorstep. Tom asked her to break up and leave Paris, and she herself hugged Emily deeply to say goodbye. Today is the first day that Emily, who has been fired from her job, it's her first day at work with no shame. She was in a panic. She had just walked in the door and said hello to Jack. She was caught by the manager.
What are you doing here? Do I need to fire you again?
Jack's prompting. She said she still had a few clients left. Meanwhile, Luke complained that he couldn't work with the perfume client. The reason was that they were 2 old men who were too strong to communicate. The only suitable candidate left was Emily. The manager has nothing to say about their flamboyant acting. Jack hurriedly handed over an invitation to Emily from the hipster brand. Even learned from Matthew that they had also invited pilots. Faced with this kind of behavior, Emily decided to go there immediately.
Excuse me?
Emily thought the manager was going to stop her, but then she heard her say that she would go with her. By now, Pierre had emerged from the darkness. This rebirth had led him to design even more stunning fashions. He was very anxious to show them to the world, but Matthew repeatedly reminded him to cancel the show. In a desperate situation, Emily told Pierre to concentrate on his designs. She already had the right venue for the show. Pierre's satisfaction with her was indescribable. As he passed the heart-locked bridge, the manager was complaining. She had guessed that Emily didn't have any space at all. If this one failed again, it meant that no more fashion companies would approach them for cooperation. Just then the 2 hipster founders made another announcement. They went even further and took over Peel's previous venue. Now the possibility of renting back the venue was gone.
We need to look at things from a different perspective.
The manager couldn't believe that Emily claimed to have found the venue. Paris Fashion Week was a day filled with celebrities from all walks of life. It made Emily nervous about her plans. Just then a limousine slowly arrives at the venue. It was the famous designer Mr. Peel who got out of the car, dressed magnificently.
Are you ready for Christmas? No. You're here to see Pierre Cadault!
He immediately attracted all the attention of the audience. Then a van slowly drove into the show square. It was Emily's carefully planned mobile booth, with models appearing one by one in avant-garde high fashion. Instantly, this indoor show which originally belonged to the hipster boys, into a personal fashion exhibition of Pierre. The atmosphere in the room instantly reached an uncontrollable situation. The two hipster founders looked at everything that was happening in front of them with fascination. Pierre finally gave them a lesson. At this moment, Pierre's heart is indescribably happy. Emily set the celebration dinner at Tom's restaurant. The news of Pierre's fight with the two rookies soon spread all over the internet. Perfume's client also came to the restaurant to celebrate for them. He heard that Tom was going back to his hometown to develop. He came to inquire about it because he couldn't afford the restaurant. Emily reluctantly said goodbye to Tom. Tom's departure took away Emily's sense of accomplishment and joy. She poured a glass of wine and opened the window. Looking at Tom, who was closing up, she slowly put down the glass of wine. She ran quickly back to the restaurant and called out Tom's name. Just when she thought she would never see him again, Tom slowly came from the side. At this moment Emily had an endless goodbye to say, but was stopped by a deep hug from Tom. The next day, the manager came to Emily. She interrupted all Emily's reports and told her that she decided not to fire Emily.
So if you are to remain at Savoir, it won't be so easy on you going forward.
The tough-talking manager left with an appreciative face. Her co-workers also gave her a thumbs up. Passing by the empty restaurant made Emily feel a sense of loss. Suddenly she heard a perfume customer greeting her. When she was surprised by Tom's appearance, Emily was confused. The client couldn't bear to see Paris lose a promising young chef. In the end, he bought the restaurant and gave it to Tom to manage. This means that Emily will be able to taste Tom's delicious food again.